I would just like to, before we start, for me, it's important to dedicate this reading to the Bebas family and to all the hostages still being kept being kept in Gaza, and I hope that we have peace soon.
Amen to that. Thanks for saying that, Baru.
Well,
What a day. Okay, thanks for coming. And as you know, we have three incredible poets that we're going to read. And if you might hear something you might inspire you to want to ask that poet a question or a question about poetry in general for our poets, because here they are. And if you do, you can put it on the chat. And we can do that after the readings. We're gonna go in alphabetical order. So we have Valerie Bacharach first, who known for a little while, and I'm very pleased to have her to hear her read for sure. Um, the editor Rachel Neve Midbar said about Valerie's work, "We are human, we are Jewish," which reminds me of what my mother always said. She would say, "We breathed, we were Jewish," when I asked her about her childhood. So that really made a connection with me. Rachel also said, "Our history is stretching back and not always easy. Our future is a minority that fits in and wants to fit in. How do we reconcile the cycle of our lives as grandchildren, children, then parents and grandparents ourselves? Like Jacob wrestling the angel, we grapple with our Jewish identity every day." How beautifully and how gently Valerie Bacharach expresses this struggle in her poems. And on that wonderful Jewish online journal called Judith, she's the editor, and it's a wonderful journal. So I encourage you to check it out. What I so admire about Valerie's poetry is how she can interweave her sage and sensitive and visceral attention to grief and beauty, as she writes in her Whitman-like embracing poem, Self-Portrait with Origin Story. And if you're going to read this tonight, Valerie, that's okay. I'm going to quote from it because I love it so much. "I am my father's forgotten daughter, too old to be an orphan. I taste cardamom and saffron, embrace my mother's ghost, haunting my heart, tattooed with mourner's cottage. Watch my husband in the garden, see the leaves on the ginkgo flutter like miniature fans. Remember my father's fragile voice, my mother's stroke slurred words, a hummingbird at the bee balm," which I love the beauty of and the sort of the pain and the beauty kind of intermingled there. And I think Valerie does that so well. Valerie is a graduate of Carlow University's MFA program and a proud member of Carlow University's Mad Women in the Attic writing workshop. Her book, Last Glimpse, published by Broadstone Books, it's a wonderful book, was published in August of 2024, so it's fairly new. Her poem, Birthday Portrait Son, published by Iliad Review, was selected for inclusion in the 2023 Best Small Fictions. She's been nominated for 3 Pushcart Prizes and 2 Best of the Nets. About Valerie's book, That Last Glimpse, the wonderful poet Judith Vollmer said, "I appreciate the poet's emotional forecasting and austerity of mind at work in prefiguring and embracing the unknown." Please welcome Valerie Bacharach.
Thank you so much. Well, can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. I want to thank Phil Turman. I want to thank Baruch November for inviting me to read tonight. I also want to thank Erica and the JCC and the Jewish Poetry Series for hosting these readings. And I'm thrilled to be reading with Richard Chess and Jessica Greenbaum also. So it's a big honor. I'm going to read some poems from my book, Last Glimpse. This book came about from me trying to figure out who I am, where I came from, what I could find of ancestors, which unfortunately was not a lot, um, what home is, And the book is filled with ghosts and loss and grief. I do have one slightly happy poem that I'll read because it's typically not what I write. My parents passed away about 7 years ago, and I will tell you, my younger son, Nathan, died 15 years ago from opioid addiction. So my beloveds are always with me and here in this book, and trying to figure out how my faith itself comes from all of that. So um, I'm going to read actually the very first poem in the book, Shavli, which is where it's part of, or was part of, Lithuania, where my father's family came from. Shavli. A nightingale wings its way in, says, fly, carries me to the grandmother of my grandmother. My hand lies in hers, placid and cool. We soar over the town, its streets filled with dirt and leftover rain. Buildings shiver in wind from the Baltic Sea. Look, you come from this place. Its sky arched and silvery, crowded with clouds. The sun traipsing toward a horizon littered with bodies. The grandmother of my grandmother strokes my hair, calls me Shana Madel, tells me the men leave, the women suffer. Feel my hand, bruised skin torn, palm worn by carrying too much. Her daughter will be Nahama, whose daughter Ida will become my grandmother. They will flee. She will die in its cold embrace. I am her dream burrowed in my body. I was in the very first class of girls who were allowed to be bat mitzvahed when I was growing up in Columbus. And so I decided as an adult I was going to try and do Daf Yomi and study Talmud. I'm not sure how successfully. So this poem is called Talmud Lessons. A page of Talmud arrives each day. I am a not very religious Jew. Faith spiders in, strands snag on questions. What is it I search for? Talmudic law, ancient text amended by ancient rabbis. People around the world study Daf Yomi from beginning to end, 7.5 years to complete. An optimistic undertaking, a gamble I will still be alive. Sages argue across centuries. What comes first, Shabbat or the blessing over wine? Light fades quickly now as holiness arrives. Trees, still leafless, silhouette against an ever-darkening sky. The Talmud says each blade of grass has an angel that whispers, grow, grow. Do the roots of grass and trees intermarry? I lie down in a meadow flanked by aspen. My cells dive below earth. Where is my holy time and place? What inheritance lives in me? My husband and I have been fortunate enough to travel. And several years ago, we were on a trip with National Geographic on the Inside Passage in Alaska between Sitka and Juneau. And we were in a small little boat in Misty Fjord. And so this poem comes from this. Misty Fjord, Alaska. We're in a boat watching a cormorant skim aquamarine water. It circles and circles, flies close to sheer granite cliffs, where it hides among green plants, where in a nest eggs wait for warmth or nestlings for food. No one speaks. The boat bobs quietly. But this lone bird continues to fly in ever-widening loops with its long neck and tiring wings. Perhaps it sees we are a danger, some unknown barrier, yet doesn't give up, flies off, returns. And I think this must be devotion, love in its simplest form, a willingness to try again and again to overcome exhaustion, find its way home. My father's family, as I said, came from Lithuania. My mother's family came from what is now Ukraine, then was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They left, luckily, before World War I came to the United States. There were a lot of terrible things happening then, pogroms, the Tsar's army in search for Jewish men and boys. And this is actually an ekphrastic poem called A Village, and I wrote it after I saw a painting by Vincent van Gogh, Three White Cottages in Sainte Marie, a village. This could be where they lived. Small, windowless cottage, roof line hanging down, a bit unsteady. A few chickens, dust, rocks, a scratch of mud. Take away lush green, leave dirt, a dingy brown under cobalt sky. Replace French words with Yiddish. Call it Kovno or Shavli. Call it Chernowitz, the pale of settlement. Add hunger's iron scent. Sketch desperation's gaunt hands. Desolation's keening voice. Call it 1908. Paint the wind of shadows, of danger, of night about to fall. You know, I remember when I first shared some poems with my parents, they both called me, they were divorced, but they both called me crying, "Can't you ever write anything happy?" So I don't, but this book is filled with loss and grief, and this poem is about my son who died, and it's called Birthday Portrait, Son. The therapist's office, pale blue couch, two brass lamps, chair upholstered in fabric the color of old snow. My husband and I wait for our son, an opioid addict living in a rundown motel. We bring him food and cigarettes, put gas in his car, stroke his arm, his hair. Remember him newborn, innocent. Today is his 26th birthday. A cake sits on the coffee table, white icing, happy birthday Nathan in blue. A grocery store cake, cheap and too sweet. In 9 days, he will be dead. But now we wait in the therapist's office, this woman who believes his words, his fallen angel smile. The room seems to give off sparks like static electricity. Each inhale, exhale sears. My husband holds my hand too tightly, his eyes opaque, while the therapist natters on, says he told her he is clean, told her no more oxy, no more heroin. The door opens, in he walks, the son we love, our love breaking us, shattering our bones as we strain to see our son hidden beneath our sun. My mother passed away 6 years ago. It's kind of wild that my parents outlived my son. I miss her a lot. The last couple of years of her life were very difficult. But she's still here. She'd be happy. I can hear her right now in my ear saying, "Yes, read that poem about me." So this poem is called Absence. Wind stirs ferns. A brilliant jay flies into juniper, its feathers blue as the berries. Russian sage, thyme, and mint release scent. Euphorbia blossoms are small suns, their centers red as the cardinal that stares at me as I stare back. My neighbor stalks her yard, talks on her phone about someone's mom who has bad knees. And now my mother, with her arthritic bones and straining heart, visits from the world to come. I wish again to alter the past, reconnect the neurons in her brain, soothe her heart's frenetic beats. But then everything else would change. My wishes will not affect the hawk's scree, the high clouds against cobalt sky. My mother's ghost stays with me as sun moves through leaves, casts shadows on grass, on my body. She has no shadow now, only the translucent shape of mother. I sip my tea, its taste of lemon and ginger on my tongue as my husband clips fading blossoms from the rhododendron. Uh, so I just want to read two more. As soon as find the one. The only one happy poem in the whole damn book. There we go. Okay, that'll be the last one. So this, I write a lot about nature also because, as the poet Jane Hirschfield says, joy and grief live side by side, and we have to have room for grief. I'm sorry, for joy within our lives. So this poem is called Grace Notes. It's hard to love this world, hard to remember, to notice fragile white blossoms opening on a tree whose name I can't recall, or the azalea in the courtyard covered with blooms purple as the great popsicles of my childhood. My mother breaking them in half, one for her, one for me, our stained mouths, mingled laughter. And here a cardinal, brilliant as a lit match, preens on a branch. Moss greens on stones. Euphorbia grows new leaves of orange striped with bronze. Each morning, while the sky is still dark, a robin sings me awake, punctures dreams I can't recall. I think of my son, gone from this world too soon. Wonder, will we ever find each other again? Will our atoms transform, become part of this spinning earth, mix with newborn leaves, the roots of onions, an earthworm plodding in darkness? The wind gentles into breeze, carries the scent of spring rain, of nourishment. Small puddles reflect budding trees. So the very last poem of mine, I wrote really for my husband. And we were in Italy, we were in Rome, and part of it takes place at a jewelry store in what was at years ago the old Jewish ghetto. Summer for Paul. Suppose I wrote heat on your card, slipped it into your pocket. Would you think of Rome? Frozen bottles of water from street vendors held against foreheads, the back of our necks, a shield against wet, thick air as we wandered among ruins and gardens. We stopped at any store with air conditioning, took 3 showers a day, never again so clean. And oh, that restaurant in Trastevere, zucchini flowers stuffed with cheese, one salty anchovy fried to crisp decadence. You bought me a necklace in the old Jewish ghetto, so intricate, it was like holding liquid silver. We kissed as clerks and customers applauded. Sometimes life is so hard, it seems made of stone. But think of our last night in that ancient city. We strolled cobbled streets in warm night air, the two of us slipping into each other's heat. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that last poem is pretty happy too. I, and lovely. And what a powerful reading, Valerie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Uh, just absorbing. It's hard to love the world, you said. especially now, maybe all the time, but we feel it now, I think. So much,
Absolutely.
as Baruch mentioned, and as we know what's going on. And so poetry helped save me through this.
Yes.
Your beautiful images, your natural images help save me too. And all of it does. So it's good to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Um, Speaking of angels, I'll never forget about the Jewish angel that doesn't answer to a Polish name. Rick Chess wrote that in a poem called Jewish Angel, which I love. And I've been an admirer of Rick's poetry ever since I first read him in the seminal Jewish poetry anthology, Telling and Remembering, in 1997. I think it was published when I first came upon your poetry, Rick. Um, it appeared when I needed it, and I loved every poet that was included, letting me know that there were poets like me who could write unabashedly about and from being Jewish. Poets like Emma Lazarus and Grace Paley, C.K. Williams, and Richard Chess. Good company you're in. And they're in too. His poems about the coat his grandfather in Minks might have worn, and lines like "When I lay down and rise up, one God at the end of the day. When I empty my pockets at dawn, I fill them again. Help give me permission that the ancient language could be poetically mine too, could speak to me now." Rick's Jewish and spiritual credentials are overwhelming. He's gone on to write since then 4 books of poetry: Love Nailed to the Doorpost, Kia, Chair in the Desert, and Third Temple. His poems have been anthologized, as I've said, in some wonderful, especially Jewish anthologies, Telling and Remembering a Century of American Jewish Poetry, the Bloomsbury Anthology of Contemporary Jewish American Poetry, and elsewhere in many journals, of course. His work, but his work has also been included, and I think this is important, in American spiritual writing, because spiritual writing is not just Jewish writing, but just the writings of the spirit and faith is highly important and integral, I think, to Rick's being in the world. He does that also through essays that have been included in Stars Shall Bend Their Voices, Poets' Favorite Hymns and Spiritual Songs, Far from the Center of Ambition, and many other places. Sometimes he posts them on Facebook, and I appreciate that, so I can go and read them. He's a regular contributor to Close Reading, the blog hosted by Slant Books. He's a member of the Corf Arts faculty of the Brandeis Bardin Institute for 3 years. He's of course, a professor emeritus at UNC Asheville, where he directed the Center for Jewish Study for only 30 years. He's also played a role in Asheville's Contemplative Inquiry Initiative. So he's got a large vision, I think. Just to skip a few things, I think it's very important to know that he was a leader organizer of Faith in Lit, a festival of contemporary writers of the spirit. And he helped organize the Faith Arts Institute, which was co-sponsored by Asheville and the famous Black Mountain College. And not only that, he has to go on and be the treasurer of Yetzirah, which I'm sure everybody knows about. So, in sum, poet, essayist, teacher, director, organizer, board member, let's just call him a Jewish angel. Rick Chess.
Oh man, thank you so much, Phil. That was so generous and so kind and so much fun to listen to. Um, I do want to happily announce I'm no longer the treasurer of Yetzirah. We actually have somebody who's qualified to be the treasurer of Yetzirah, but I am still a founding member of the board and still happily serving on the board. And it's a real honor to be here. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Baruch. Thank you, Erica. And so wonderful to read with Valerie and with Jess Greenbaum. Valerie, that was an amazing and very deeply moving reading. So I'm going to read a few newer poems, and then I'll read a couple older poems, one of which you quoted from just a few minutes ago. So I was happy to know, okay, maybe I picked well by choosing that poem to read. So, and anyway, I'm going to start with a few newer poems. This first one, the title of the first one is Let the Newspaper Sweeten Its Song. Let the Newspaper Sweeten Its Song. And I was writing this in response to stuff that was really prominent in the news about a year ago. It's still very much in the news, though there's a whole lot of other stuff in the news these days that could be a lot sweeter than it actually is. Let the newspaper sweeten its song. After the pogrom, after a belief that pogroms were no more, once I believed I lived far from an enemy. I ate olives. I sat on a hill lazy afternoons watching sheep graze on an opposite hill, a shepherd with a staff not far behind. That, of course, was a dream. The sheep, the shepherd, the staff. But it might as well have been real as I gazed out my office window at the street below. What did I, with my fine physique and slender thinking, know? Today, I read the news in the comfort, the coffin of my own home. The enemy is far and near. The world's gossip is the flame outside my door. I will speak to the flame, says Angel Gabriel. When you wade through it, it will not harm you. He lies. They gather against me. They gather and march against me. They wave a flag in a central station. They cross a bridge from borough to borough. They proclaim, they defame. Once I believed my city was the cup of deliverance. Now I wonder if any city, LA, Philly, Asheville, Jerusalem, is my home. When this war is over, the enemy will be no more. Who translates for the reporter in the field? No peace till the sun and moon are no more. If there were a dream to save me, to save us, let it come. Let it be cut on my heart, on our hearts, with a stylus of iron and lead. And let the newspaper sweeten its song. The place of my death and burial is set. Till then, I drink water from the reservoir, a reservoir far from terror, pristine mountain water shepherded to my sink by city workers. I fill my glass. I check for live updates on my phone. This next poem is called As Sabbath Dissolves. And that first poem, like this poem, were part of a group that I had been calling A Hebrew Poet of Muslim Spain Reads the New York Times, with a colon and then like a individual title for each individual poem. And I've dropped the name of that overall group, but I should say that in these poems, I am certainly responding to things in the news, and I'm weaving together language drawn from some of the major Hebrew poets of Muslim Spain. And in these two poems, I'm drawing in language from Solomon ibn Gabirol and Shmuel HaNagid. And this particular poem is responding to a specific story that was in the New York Times on May 5th, 2024, the headline of which was From Free Speech to Free Palestine, 6 Decades of Student Protest. And I happened to write it not long after I visited my friend Sharon Dolan, who lives on the Upper West Side, just a few blocks from Columbia University. As Sabbath dissolves. Wailing jackals. That's the sound we thought we heard tonight as we passed near the campus where 1,000 dreams ago we found each other. We thought about the days we walked on the quad, wafting its spices, philosophy, biology. We thought about the hour when all who are sick at heart cry, and about the library where we wandered the stacks. You whose hair flashed like fire, me exalted in my trembling as I recognized the sign. We were already on the way to death. There were protesters then, too, who vowed to shatter with a hammer the palace of higher ed, where self-assured men were complicit in a faraway war. We thought our lives were wide. We didn't see that the road was narrow. We didn't know we lived in a land that holds no friends. I should have taken you by hand, dear trembling one, before we parted, returning, each of us alone, to the weathered ruins of our souls. Oh, like cloves, how you tasted back then, that bittersweet flavor as Sabbath dissolves into a new week. I I have a poem that's sort of about happiness called I Know What Happiness Is. And I might read it, but I'm not sure that I'll get to that. And I won't read poems that are just in response to contemporary events or situations. Um, the next poem, or maybe two that I'm going to read, are from another longer group I've been working on called The Loneliest Monk. The Loneliest Monk. One day, I came home and told my wife I'd been listening to a bunch of Thelonious Monk. And she said to me, The Loneliest Monk? And as soon as she said that, I thought, okay, there's something there for me to explore. So for the last couple of years, I've been writing a bunch of poems, trying to get to know who this loneliest monk is, his present and his past. And so this is a poem from that series. It's called The Loneliest Monk, Behind the Door, Between the Lines. And it's in third person, talking about the loneliest monk. He was already, even then, at the door to heaven, though he didn't know it was God behind the door. He didn't know it was a door. He thought it was a woman, the smell of steak in her hair after their shift, their midnight escape to the shore, the sand dune behind which they hid the wreckage of desire, and then the German car parked in a stranger's driveway where they sank into high back seats, crushed by the weight of drugs for which they had exchanged a night's tips, and slept until the home owner's shriek when she opened her door to retrieve the morning paper. God was nothing to him then, less than nothing. The cadavers were something, her cadaver in particular, viewed through a small window of a locked door when anatomy class was not in session. She loved bodies, cold or hot, and she scolded him when he fumbled, when he didn't know what to touch and how and when to touch it. Clitoris. A word was not the thing then. His life depended on pleasing her. That was all. Then it was gone. Then she was gone. And a word was the thing. Language, the body he wanted close to his body. If not exactly God, then as close to God as he ever hoped to come. Chapter, verse. Now you can read the turning pages of his face, a page of light, a dark page, and decide for yourself if God and man are one, or if the divine now hides between the lines. So, three more poems, one more from that series. This one is called The Loneliest Monk, Good Boy, and begins with like a little head note, a little quote from Maurice Lamb's book, The Jewish Way in Death and Mourning. Even if the deceased willed cremation, his wishes must be ignored in order to observe the will of our Father in heaven. And that's from Maurice Lamb. I'll quote him again in the body of the poem. The loneliest monk, good boy. She challenged him to disobey her, but he failed. The Ziploc bag of ashes is proof. His father, too, chose cremation. That box of ashes went to his brother. He declined the invitation to join them, his brother and mother, for the scattering. Their mother's ashes divided equally between them. But she was in life his alone. He devoted his life to proving that, and he waited for her to admit that, yes, she was the mother of two sons, one of whom she loved in a way the other would never know. Those who are willfully cremated, writes Lamb, have abandoned Jewish law and surrendered their rights to posthumous honor. His brother doesn't know that law. She must have tested him on other matters. He rubs his glasses clear. He sees the hour, all the hours she waited for him to defy her. Even now, at 63, hearing her forbid him from kissing another girl, he was 10 when she caught him lip to lip with Robin, he turns away from desire. Enough already, she'd scold him if her tongue still moved. Give yourself away to another woman's love. With both hands, he holds a heavy Hebrew Bible. He sees her on the bema in the president's seat, her annual bold red hat confirming for all the Jews gathered in pews that a new year has begun. She knew the laws to mark the turning, and at a somber hour in a congregant's home, she knew the page for El Male Rachamim, God full of compassion, and mourner's Kaddish. Prayers she humbly led. How much does her love weigh now? Her honor. His lips pursed. He longs for a divine kiss. He could scatter his portion in a place she loved and be done with it, be done with her. A sandwich bag of ashes and fragments of bone. And so one last poem. This is the one, Phil, that you quoted from. It's from my first book, Tekiah, the last poem in the book, and it's called Two and One. And when I'm reading this poem to some audiences, I need to explain this poem a little more before I read it, but I don't think I need to do that here. Two and One. Two roses I gave the therapist, one for my thorny soul, one for hers. Two answers to a stepdaughter, one in the hollow voice of her father. 2 days with an old friend, one to recover the past, one to recover from the past. But I turn to one God only when I lie down and rise up. One God at the end of a day when I empty the pockets, and at dawn when I fill them again. A proverb I recalled from my father the day he confessed he was broke. Rich man and poor man meet. The Lord made them both. He listened patiently. Two gifts for the bride, one of this world, one of the world to come. But I labor to repair one world only when I walk by the way. 2 coins for the beggar, 2 loaves for the Sabbath, which ends when 3 stars open in the Saturday night sky. 2 parents, neither one on this earth. 2 hands, one with which to give, one with which to take away. 2 ears with which to hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Thank you so much for your attention. And thanks to all of you who are joining us for tonight's reading.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you, Rick, for great readings. Truly wonderful to have both of you and to get to hear you read your work. We are doubly blessed, and soon we'll get to enjoy the next poet, Jessica Greenbaum's poetry too. And so let me introduce her now. Um, Tony Hoagland said that read when he reads Jessica Greenbaum's poetry, he feels himself open and relaxed in the world. To offer this experience is an accomplishment in the frantic and peaceless world we live in now. Moreover, Grace Schulman said Jessica's poems are enlivened by keen observation, a fresh mind, and vivid sense of place. To be praised in such ways by 2 great poets says much about Jessica Greenbaum's work. In one of my favorite poems by Jessica, entitled The Storm-Struck Tree, she writes the following lines: "Have mercy on us, you, the massively beautiful, now ravaged and charged with destruction. We did speak like that, as if from a book of Psalms, because it took up the sky." Here we see how Jessica can elevate what is broken to the divine, a rare and wondrous skill in a poet. Her recent book, Spilled and Gone, was named the best book of 2021 by the Boston Globe, and her previous books have remarkably won similar honors. All right, Jessica, uh, I'm excited to hear your work.
Thanks so much, Baruch. And yeah, thanks for that really generous intro, and thanks to you and Philip for hosting. I feel like my poems are friends with Rick and Valerie's poems, and they enliven my thinking and my thinking about poems. I'm so glad they're all together. Thanks to the Zoomers who are here, the Yetzirah crowd, the New York crowd. Thank you so much. Great to see you all. This poem's called To Memory. I'm passing you this note to remind you when suffering first appeared. It was 1971 when Mr. Jaffe came back from retirement to save us from obliviousness with his gravelly voice, strained, we figured, from the years of picket lines and anti-war demos, and pausing that day's lesson in our junior high school social studies class, he said, "You guys don't get it. Everyone's lives are not like yours." Who knows what sparked his short lecture to the gum chewers, the bangle and expensive boot wearers, the whole house havers, the casually bored, the casually fed, the minority living as a majority in a town our parents who were born into the Depression, as Mr. Jaffe had been, worked to choose for that very effect. And one spring afternoon, as I might have been drawing a flower in the margins of my spiral notebook, with leaves going this way and that, Mr. Jaffe lifted the roof from its cinder block eaves, and the sky caved in, which laid the groundwork for any other lessons. But I think you may have forgotten that, since dates so elude you now. Just want to note the community of poetry that is the soil and the sun and the rain for us here, and just a note of appreciation to all. Ask any generation. They'll say the world has never been this critically wrecked. It's hit a wall. It's hit the shoals and splintered into parts. They fear the globe's a wooden boat we can't protect from sunlight, in whose oceanic orbit it's been decked with space trash tossed by power-hungry, lonely hearts. We sense the world has never been this critically wrecked, as if the captain's cosmic course, like Ahab's, went unchecked, careening through Andromeda and off the charts, and now the globe's a wooden boat we can't protect from any myth, a bark on violent seas without a Jonah to suspect, except ourselves. Well, not all ourselves, evils a la carte. The world has never been this critically wrecked. Ask any generation trying madly to collect the shattered constitution of the hull. It's the ignorance that smarts and makes the globe a wooden boat we can't protect. If violence starts in sorrow and greed makes leaders derelict and extra more unmoored, can we restart this arc from start? Because really now, our world has never been so critically wrecked. The globe, the US, democracy, all just a wooden boat we can't protect.
Wow.
I appreciated Valerie's introduction of travel as a privilege, and was thinking that same thing when I was going to introduce this poem, which came from a very fortunate trip thanks to my husband's encouragement. We had the great fortune to go on a walking safari in Tanzania. And really one huge feeling from those days and that immersion was the opposite of the poem before, and the realization and the really visceral sense of how much we crave the sense of being someplace we don't fear being destroyed, that we really yearn for that. And when we are allowed to be in it for any number of reasons of good fortune, what it means to us. So this poem's called The Fifth Day. It was the morning of the fifth day. The wind had come up during the night, cowing all sides of the tent, and now the animals stirred through the boundless Serengeti. Impala, porcupine, eland, mongoose, cheetah, hartebeest, wandering, and the songbirds shot through the currents, the eagle and vultures riding it out for the day. We learned their names because that was, of course, the first thing. The bones in a tree told the story of a leopard's dinner, and the imprint along the river's sandy bank described the lion's nap. Grouse gathered river water in their feathers to carry miles away. And earlier, a buffalo had kneeled in the mud. An elephant had climbed the rocky mound to reach sweet bushes at the top, where hyrax hid between the stones. Now the ants, which could eat a person alive, streamed steeply down, some forming walls through which to safely channel their fellows, then continued like poured tar along the plain without an end we could see, and the aardvark, coming up from her hole at night, could follow behind and sip them by the thousands. No one shamed us being new to the wonders. Given more time, I might distinguish the tracks correctly, and I might learn some of the 500 bird calls. But for now, I guessed wrong about each hoof print, set of horns, each wing shape, and ostrich gender. Maybe this is what I did with words before I could read. I've always wondered what the letters looked like before I knew how each behaved and what they did together and for each other in herds or flocks, how I saw them before they came into focus on the white plane of paper, like the blurry, hurrying H on the horizon, showing in the binoculars as a cantering giraffe. Here's a little poem called Thank You. On the way to see my friend, the night before, still asleep, I began an encyclopedia of thank yous to the city to let my friend know what I'd been up to. I included gardens, agencies, the carousels and libraries, the museums, the 7 corners and boulevards. I addressed the sunset views and the sparrows' nests in the open tubes of street lamps. I included the roofless bathhouse on the sand, the sunken neighborhood with horses, the storefront's floating display of hats, and the skyline from the highway. I noted the stolen visions into living rooms and the old school architecture of the old schools, the banisters to balance us, the furniture in parks, the hawks with their clutched purse of mouse, the lit raccoon eyes in the cemetery, and the night bridges sparkling like barrettes on dark hair. And because I was only thanking things, I could leave a lot out. But for each, I had a template. And for each, the thing I thanked wrote back to me, complete with video. And this went on until I realized it had been my life. And that's why my footsteps continued tapping along the sidewalk. Rain blurred the ink inside my notebook, and I praised at 4 a.m. the smell outside the closed restaurant of onions frying for us later, to be ready for us later. Here's a little poem that it's actually for Philip Lopate, called I Had a Teacher. I had a teacher in a fiction writing class, a class I had no business taking because clearly I can't write fiction. And he was a tall man, older than we, and he made us laugh because after reading a student's story, he would look out from the front of the room as if on a hillside overlooking the rooftops of a little village holding all of experience. And from there, he easily located the existing genre into which the story fit. So with a wise affection for the human condition, he might say, oh, this is a boy befriends escaped elephant story. Or, oh, this is a woman grows herbs that give her special powers story. And one day, He even said, "Oh, this is a man frozen in a block of ice wakes up story." And I thought, oh, now he's gone too far. And it took time. It really did. First to realize that soon enough, we were older than he when he was our teacher. And then no sooner did life narrate the next moment than I would think kindly, oh, this is the happy second marriage in France story, or this is the sudden cancer story, or this is the woods were once filled with parrots and panthers story. And it came to pass that we ourselves could see the rooftops and felt a real tenderness for the miniatures on their rounds, the older woman carrying a net bag to buy bread, and her mother, whose ring I myself wear, now closing her eyes. I'm just going to end with just another thank you and gratitude for homes and the way our friends and community give life to them. This is called Ode to Doubt. Cowlick of the combed thought. Today I praise your interruption of the smooth plan, your distracted hum beneath the selected hymn. Without you, our drama is delivered in soliloquy. Our travels a couth path from A to Z, no swaying, doubling back, or veering. And surely we once dreamed of such direction. We once craved clear instruction. But these decades on, your course correction, your static-filled obfuscation of a first message goes up against the royalty of right and wrong, like a court dissident with subversive charms just come to town. I have seen your work up close. It built my house and paved my road to it. I think you line the bridal gown and are the seashell's second thought. Not only would the manufacturers of pencil erasers lose their livelihood, but the raison d'etre of PS and codas, of cancellations, and the low, late in the day bow to intuition would all be lost in the homogeneity ruling the lockstep blueprints of our worst architecture. Ambivalence, wrongly typecast as villain, may be seen as blind justice, holding scales, interrupting decision, and asking for more time. We need more time. If not hunted by pythons or big cats, we need more time. The split-second decision can be split again as the rock with layers spills its colored minerals. We will rarely know if the first thought was best. That living mystery is why day turns. Said to be a planted seed, I think you are also the shade of the age-old tree under which we sit, against whose scratchy bark I lean, and bitten by an ant of doubt, think again about these very lines. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Thank you all. Thank you, Valerie and Rick. I want to point out, we should have mentioned this earlier, but if some of you may have seen in the chat that if you want to take these poets home, we are home. Bring these order these poets to your house, then you could website or the book links are on the chat if you want to know more about them and you want to order any, which we highly encourage. But thanks so much. Wow, phenomenal. And how appreciative we are of the sense of community that we have here, and the the poets almost seeming talking to each other in some ways without it planned. Baruch, any wise words you want to contribute?
Just one word, fantastic.
Okay. Does anybody
Uh,
have any questions or any comments or any superlatives you wish to contribute in our little kibitz section? Come on, we're Jews, we kibitz.
I want to thank the students from my class that made it onto Zoom tonight. I really appreciated seeing you and everyone in general. It's really nice to have such a great audience.
Yeah.
Poets.
I want to mention our next reading is March 13th, which is early in the month for us, but March 13th, and we're going to have a couple of the poets are actually on the screen, or at least I thought they were earlier. Maybe they still are. Susan Eisenberg and Joshua Gottlieb Miller. I think I saw you somewhere. There you are. And hi, Judy Robinson will be the three poets reading in March. And then we have poets scheduled for April and May, but Buffalo JCC will have a separate graphic for that. We don't have that up yet, but we'll go till May as far as we know. So
again, the date, please.
March 13th is our next. You'll all be reminded.
Yep. Yep. I'll send out a reminder. I also just put the link into the chat too, where you can register.
And we have some alumni here tonight, so which was wonderful. I think Richard Michelson's here, and I noticed a few others. Good to see you, Rick. Richard? Rich, I should say. Is anything else from the Zoom folks?
I'm going to repost the links to the books so that everyone, if you're interested, you can have a look at them and hopefully bring the poets home, like Phil said.
I think Erica might post them on in her
oh yeah, that's true too.
Yeah,
follow-up email.
Either one. I'll be sure to put it in the email with the YouTube link. We are recording, so that'll be uploaded to the JCC YouTube page, and then I will be sure to send it out to everyone that signed up tonight.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say that it's almost 0 degrees where I am, and 40 miles per hour winds out there. Whoa. And with everything else happening, it's just really nice to cuddle up in front of this screen and hear this just wonderful poetry with fellow poetry passionate enthusiasts. So thank you very much. And let's do it again next month.
Sounds good. All
right. I guess I get to go see the Cleveland Cavaliers play basketball on TV. I think they're winning. So.
They're always winning these days.
Yes, they are. Let's not jinx it, though.
This was great. Thanks so much for inviting me. Really enjoyed it.
Sure, Valerie.
And same, feel the same way.
Yeah, it was
Thank you so much, Rick, Jessica, and Valerie. It was wonderful getting to hear you.
Yes. And Rick, it's so great to see you after all these years.
I know, it's great. You got to come back to Asheville.
I may very well.
Oh, good. I'm counting on it.
Good. Okay. All right.
Good.
Cool.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you.
Zoomers from Jessica.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks for making it happen.
Thanks so much.